Hi, everyone. From wherever you are joining, thanks for joining us today for this exciting LinkedIn Live. I'll shortly get to the agenda and our exciting panelists, but thank you for making the time. Today, we are all here to discuss this topic, which is really around how do you think about customer experience or CX, which, in our opinions, here at Everest Group and beyond, has just gotten smarter, faster, and better with what else but agentic AI. It's really hard to have a conversation today in technology without talking about the profound impact that agentic AI can have. And I have with me two incredible panelists who will help steer the conversation today, bringing their rich experience, both as a practitioner, as an advisor, as an analyst, into this dialogue. Just in terms of what we're likely to cover today, and for others who've joined our LinkedIn Lives before, you might know that we like to have some fun with it. So I'd love to understand where our audience is joining from. This is a long-standing Everest Group tradition. So if you can put where you're joining from in the comments, and also what you'd like to learn today, that will be fun, and we'll try and do a quick roundup. To introduce myself personally, my name is Nitish. I'm a partner with Everest Group. I'm joining from London, which is not so sunny today, which is again not a surprise. But I lead a lot of our work around the CMO as well as sustainability. So really excited about the conversation we have today. Sunil, let me hand it over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Nitish and Tisha. Sunil Karkera, hello to all of you joining us live today. I'm talking to you from fabulous weather in San Francisco, California. Uh, and really, thank you for the opportunity to do this. And my background is I'm the founder and chief engineer of a new startup called Soul of the Machine. I know you're wondering about the name. And the focus is around bringing modern AI to the enterprise. In my past, I have been at agencies, at large corporations, as well as I've founded 3 startups in the past. And so, wish me luck.
Perfect. Sunil, you're absolutely in the right moment at the right time, and you're in the heart of innovation in the Bay Area. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for the collaboration. Nisha, let me hand it over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Sunil. Thanks, Nitish. Hi, everyone. I'm Nisha Krishan. I'm a vice president with Everest Group. And as part of my role, I lead our marketing and interactive experience practice. I work closely with the provider side of the ecosystem, advising a lot of service providers and technology companies on their go to market strategy in this space. And on the enterprise side, I help a lot of organizations navigate the increasingly complex customer experience and marketing landscape. Really excited to be part of today's session. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Nisha. So, just in terms of setting this up, while we like to be more informal and conversational, and the audience will be pleased to know we don't have any slides today. So, again, Sunil, I also hope somebody wishes me luck. It's always fun to see an analyst and advisor without slides, but we'll see if we can manage it. Uh, but what we'd like to do today is really discuss how CX is changing with agentic AI. And if I really step back a little bit, I think it's an opportune time to discuss this, and not just from a customer experience perspective, but if I really think about the CMO mandate. Today we're diving into why agentic AI is not just a simple technology trend. It's really a game changer for CMOs and customer experience leaders, whether it's personalized interactions to scalable service. So everything across the marketing, sales, and service value chain. We are standing at the cusp of how AI agents will reshape how brands connect, compete, and interact with their audiences. So today, what we'll try and do is, try and set it up. How did we get there? Not a history lesson, but a little bit of market context. B, we'll explore some real world use cases, measurable impact. So what's real, what's not, how much of this is vaporware, how much of that is real impact. And then we'll try and end with some implications around what does it mean for your CX strategy, your brand strategy as you go forward. If I just take a quick look at where our audience is joining from, I think it's a fairly global audience, which is pretty regular for LinkedIn Live events at Everest Group. The common thing seems to be, if I look at, whether it's Florida, Delhi, maybe not so much Toronto, they're all sunnier than London, which again, should not surprise me. Wow, we've got Guatemala City. So again, all, all cities, which make me wish I was there. But it seems like we have a fairly global audience, Sunil and Nisha, which is good because
Right.
the more diverse opinions we have, the better. So let's start. As I said, the first part of this three-part conversation will really focus on how we got here. It seems to me that when in this environment, and even in the last 5 years, the the gap between successive technology trends is just collapsing, right? It almost seems a simplistic time in 2022 when we all found or stumbled upon this thing called chat gpt. The models of today, the AI intent of today seems much more advanced than even 3 years ago. And if you zoom back 5-10 years, things such as blockchain, quantum, metaverse, they all seem to be rapidly gaining pace. But if we just focus on the field of AI, and Nishal, I'll start with you. Can you try and explain to our audience, as an analyst, as a student of the industry, perhaps, how did we get here, right? What's the market context? Is this something radically new? Or have agents always been around, just a new name now? How did we get here, and what were maybe the more successive building blocks to get us to this point?
Sure. Thank you, Nitish. So I think what is important over here to remember is that AI has been through its own evolution and its definition has continued to change over a period of time. Back in the day, there were some rule-based systems which were termed as AI. So think of a basic chatbot that was programmed to do a particular task. And at that point in time, because technology was not that mature, those simple rule-based chatbots were termed as AI. But then came machine learning and deep learning into the picture. And the thing about some of these technologies were that they had the ability to learn from historical data, to figure out patterns. And as a result of machine learning and deep learning, you had more complex use cases beyond rule based systems, complex use cases such as recommendation engines, complex use cases such as fraud detection systems, definitely smarter, but still very narrow in scope. And when we were talking about machine learning and deep learning, there was this general consensus in the industry that while AI can help us do a lot, but it cannot enter the domain of human creativity. Creativity was always limited to humanity. And then came generative AI, where AI did enter the realm of human creativity. With generative AI, you could generate text, you could generate images, you could generate code. It was conversational, it was creative, and it was context driven as well. But now, today, where we stand is we're entering the era of agentic AI. And what is interesting about these systems is that these systems act on their own. They set goals and they solve problems proactively. These are the systems that will continuously run in the background. These systems will trigger actions on their own based on the data that they have access to, based on predefined rules that have been set for them. And most importantly, unlike other forms of AI, which we just discussed, they do not require explicit user prompts or permission for each of the actions. And therefore, it is drastically different from some of the chatbots and assistants that we have encountered in the past. So, yeah, agentic AI today, when we speak in the context of customer experience or outside of it, uh, it is a step towards human endeavor of creating intelligent goal-based systems. So yeah, that's my take on how it has evolved and how we got here. But Sunil, given your experience and you've been at the forefront of designing experiences for more than 2 decades, and with Soul of the Machine, you're also at the forefront of driving adoption of agentic AI among a lot of enterprises in the industry. So why don't you talk a bit about the technology and what you are hearing from the clients?
Absolutely. Thank you, Nisha. So, to build on what you said, one of the key reasons I've founded Soul of the Machine is to focus on bringing modern AI to the enterprise. So that modern AI is kind of a very important factor here, which is, I believe, at the cusp of about a decade ago when a paper came out from Google called Attention is Everything. And that paper was a beautifully readable paper, and that introduced a transformer as a model. And the transformer enabled us to generate and create, just like Nisha said, right? And in certain narrow areas, even match human level judgment in certain places, right? So that was a game changer. We could do now language understanding, and to steal from Jensen Huang, the NVIDIA CEO, we could build information factories, right? We could actually build information factories, and that has given rise to a particular architectural pattern of AI called agentic. And that pattern is, we'll probably have newer patterns in the future, but agentic brings a significant evolution in how we will design applications that we couldn't design before this. And for example, an agentic application is a goal-seeking system. So you have a goal, and that an agentic system will break down that goals into multiple tasks, do dynamic planning, and this is the difference: dynamic planning. That means a plan was not created or authored by a programmer before at design time. This is programming at runtime, right? That's the key. It has reflection to understand and improve and evolve as it evolves, so without new code updates. And it also has long-term and short-term memory, so it can keep a working task, just like our human brain has a task memory for short-term tasks, like 3 tasks I think we can keep in our brain. And then the agentic systems can actually do agent-to-agent collaboration within your enterprise or outside your enterprise. So an agent from your company can actually collaborate with an agent from another travel agency, for example, for travel planning. So significantly different types of applications are now possible with agentic and the evolution of the AI with AI. So I'm really excited to in this part of the continuum of technology. But one thing I would say is that uh, modern AI with deep engineering is also a design problem and a strategy problem. So do not, please always be aware that when modern AI meets bad design, it's a recipe for failure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sunil, that's a really interesting point. And Nisha, thanks for setting it up. And if I extend the point around design and how critical that is to the success or the lack of for AI, by the way, Sunil, I love the framing around modern AI. And we are at Everest Group big proponents around agentic AI. We have a slightly different term around this. We call this is the advent of systems of action. We have a bunch of research around systems of action in different areas, but the premise is really the following. We've had systems of records for a while. Think of all the blue screens of deaths for ERP, MIS that we had in the 80s, 90s, and beyond. We then moved to systems of engagement. Think CRM, think customer data platforms, think some of the commerce platforms. Good visualization, better dashboards, potentially a single version of truth. But again, the missing link was these systems weren't generating actions or the right action. And systems of action with agentic workflows is really fulfilling the promise and the premise of this. So I'm sure we'll put our recent research around systems of action in the comments. Check it out. We have different versions of this. But to your point around design, I think one of the elements you're picking up around agentic, given what you both said, is how does it not just make the process go faster, but how does it lead to a better process or a better workflow? And that's what didn't happen with primitive automation 7 8 years ago, right? Remember process automation in the early days. Most clients who adopted a bot to automate a process realize, hey, if you put a bot on a dumb process, you still have a dumb process at the end of this. So one of the potential areas of agentic AI that we're seeing is how do we get to a better process, a better workflow in the end, not just automating it and going faster. So to your point around first principles, figuring out what the right design is, and then consequently what the right adoption looks like, I think that's really, really important versus just jumping in without that consideration. So I just wanted to make sure we underscore that. Now, before we get into maybe why it's a game changer for customer experience and CMOs everywhere, let's talk a little bit about what some of the use cases in agentic AI are right now. We all realize, some of the truly bleeding edge use cases are right now in their infancy, but I'm a big fan of progress over perfection. So maybe Sunil, I'll hand it back to you. Just a quick, roundup in terms of what do you think are the primary use cases which offer the most potential for agentic AI, including early adoption and things such as customer service, perhaps?
Sure. Uh, in general, when we look at use cases, I see a lot of use cases on the web, for example, on travel agency and all those things. I will go away from that and give you something from my customers on very complex enterprise experiences. So, for example, one of my customer actually does global maintenance, repair, and overhaul of aircrafts, right, globally. So MRO operations. So an aircraft flying makes money. An aircraft on the ground is a waste, right? So it's a cost. So to reduce downtime and increase flying time, what we have implemented is an agentic system. So we've transformed a simple, a fairly advanced predictive maintenance into a dynamic planning MRO system. That means a plane that is flying is communicating with a protocol called ADSP to the ground about its particular engine performance, its hydraulics, fuel, all those different components, and it's flying with about 200,000 plus mission critical components that requires at certain times different mean time between failure servicing on the ground before gate turnaround or at the facility, right? So an agentic system that we have designed is actually dynamically understanding aircraft performance from the signals it's received, really managing ground handling, looking up inventory from in-sourced or third parties and bringing it in to the ground and planning how can I turn this aircraft around really quickly. And really nobody wrote the code for this, right? It is actually dynamically planning it, and it's also bringing the right notifications to multiple applications that are also delivering. Rather than one of the goals of how we design agentic is to increase the output ratio and decrease the input ratio. So that means you are typing less and getting more. So this MRO system is about getting the telemetry, dynamically planning, and bringing in, reducing aircraft times into like having it fly more. And this can be used for e-commerce. It can be used for manufacturing. It can be used for employee experience. The patterns are same. And the second pattern I will cover is in telco. In telco, 80% of the calls that come in are billing problems. Okay. Why is my bill like this? And I know a lot of telcos send an email that says bill explainer emails. What we're implementing for a major telco is a human voice explaining with empathy, finding out which customers have billing issues, proactively calling them up and telling them why your bill, what can you expect from your bill? Why is it like that? And if they want to intervene and change their product and service, they can do it, and the agent actually does the changes for them, right? So that's the power of agentic.
Yep, I think those are a couple of great illustrations. And I think if you go back to the principles of agentic AI that we started with, the fact that it has memory, can reason, or it has memory and can reason over multiple steps, can use different tools, APIs, external systems to achieve a particular goal, in this case, build transparency, can learn from these interactions and evolve, to your point around learning almost in flight, pun not intended. I think those are very, I think, powerful illustrations of that. So, Nisha, if we take that and look at all of our learnings, across Fortune 1000 enterprises, what we're seeing from the tech provider ecosystem, and also some of the work we do with investors, how does that reconcile with what you're seeing as interesting, emerging, maybe breakthrough value use cases for agentic AI in marketing and experience?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think I'll take a I'll take a step back in order to answer that question, because it's very important for us to understand that when it comes to the application of agentic AI in the customer experience space, traditionally how AI has been powering customer experience and what has changed today. So if you look at customers, whenever a customer goes to any brand, they go with an intent. Now, whether that intent is to discover something, to buy something, to resolve a query, to raise a complaint, etc., there is some kind of a resolution that a customer is looking for. But now, currently, with the current technology systems, the systems are not designed to respond to that intent instantaneously, but the customer is forcibly made to go through a journey that may not always help them with that particular intent right at that point in time, and therefore dropouts happen. Therefore brands lose a lot of revenue, therefore brands are not able to retain a lot of customers. But when you talk about the potential of agentic AI in customer experience, what is very interesting is that it responds to the intent that the customer is coming for instantaneously. E-commerce is a classic example. If you look at how digital commerce or e-commerce websites are designed today, there are very rigid menus which a customer has to go through. There is a journey that each of the customers have to go through to finally make a purchase. And we all know the dropout rates, the cart abandonment rate in the e-commerce ecosystems. But if brands were to redesign their entire e-commerce using agentic AI, it will almost become a very intent based entry point. So think of going to an e-commerce website, and rather than going through those rigid menus and then going through a plethora of products, you just go and say, hey, I need a birthday gift for my husband who loves gardening, and possibly the birthday gift should be under $50. What you've done is that the customer journey over here has collapsed. The customer journey has changed into converting an intent into AI curating something, a conversational navigation happening, and then proactive fulfillment happening. So for me, when it comes to the role of agentic AI in customer experience space, it is not just about better automation. It's a system that intelligently collaborates with users. And then once you start thinking in the form of intent and working on those intents, then a plethora of use cases open in the customer experience space. Now those use cases can be around personalization, those use cases could be around service and issue resolution, it could also be about product discovery and navigation, about customer discovery and onboarding. So there is absolutely no end to it, uh, as long as you think about fulfilling the customer intent in a very frictionless manner.
Absolutely. I think that's a really interesting point, specifically around intent. And if I again see how we expand on it or unpack it, you can almost imagine a scenario or a couple of scenarios. One, as you said, customers can now start expecting instant, maybe personalized and frictionless support. How do you also now take traditional systems which are not built for dynamic intent driven engagement, and flip that switch, so and offer that at scale? But the second thing is, in some ways, we've been using agentic AI. The first port of call for agentic AI has been around customer service, order fulfillment, for the lack of a better term, simpler use cases, which are fundamentally around efficiency, improving the productivity of a process, etc. To your point around intent and curation of that experience, we can even extend that to say, how can agentic AI, underwrite or empower new degrees of monetization, right? Not just fulfilling a service or doing customer service better. So I think there's a spectrum of that, whether you're using it for productivity right now or efficiency, or are you using it for experiences, new experiences, eventually newer monetization models as well. So I think that's a fair point. Let's maybe now get to our second part of our conversation. And before I do that, I wanted to quickly signpost people to some of the links that are in the chat. you know uh, to my earlier discussion around systems of action, you can see the link and you can use it to see our research around this. And we are very, very, very bullish on this. As I said, we will have further iterations of this for different areas on our portal. We also have a link around what Sunil and the fantastic team that he has is up to around digital self-service. It's a two-part white paper that you can look at to understand, especially on customer service, and some of the examples that Sunil mentioned. You can learn more about that. So, if we move to the second part of our conversation, Sunil and Nisha, I'd like to talk about measurable ROI, right? So, if you think about AI, I often think in all of our conversations with clients, yes, there are some who are still skeptical of AI, but that's not a majority of senior executives. A majority of them are sold on the topic of around AI. You can call it FOMO, or fear of missing out. You can call it, early evangelists around it. But the topic that now keeps coming up in year three, year four, sort of since the chat GPT phenomena, is ROI, not just AI, right? And how do I measure it, right? And how do I get it? And B, how do I measure it? So if you think about measurable ROI and the impact of agentic AI, this latest wave compared to other parts of AI, Sunil, what are you seeing in terms of impact? And that impact could be on, and I don't want to lead the witness, but impact could be on things such as, how does it reduce human effort in certain things? could be around NPS uplift, could be resolution times. But are you starting to see some escape velocity in terms of impact of agentic AI in experience?
Yeah, we're starting to see measurable outcomes and the ways to measure it, and which we'll talk later a little bit on the later part of it, how to measure it. But in we look at three vectors in terms of measurement. The first vector is can I get new revenue growth? The second vector is can I deliver better experience? And the third vector is can I reduce my costs, operating costs, right? So with the same cost or reduced cost, can I have better growth and higher experiences, right? So I'll give you an example. So one of my customers, we are actually moving about 30% of the incoming calls to agentic. That means actually an agent is handling calls, not the old-fashioned IVR with the office music on hold. This is actually agents that is immediately available. So the call, if there's a customer calling a particular line, then an agentic customer service is actually picking up the call immediately and walking you through it, right? That has in our current small single category tests, and there is not a big body of work right now across agentic. So there's early tests, I would say, that's brought down escalation patterns between 20 to 30%, like reduction in escalation patterns, because it's really quick. People really love to be heard very quickly. Okay. And that also has a downshift effect on NPS, right? 10% or 20% increase 10 to 20 point increases in NPS, right? And I would also say that the under the iceberg agentic has a over the iceberg effect. So when I said about the example of the aircraft turnaround, it's an aircraft that's available for customers to fly with better customer experience, right? So there's that effect. So we're seeing escalation times go down, better NPS, and we also think that what we're starting to see is agentic experiences built into the product itself, that there is no call in the first place. The call did not happen at all because it's resolved at the touch point of the user, right? So that's a significant outcome of experience that is allowing better outcomes, right? I will not go into the areas of the economics, especially lesser people to do more and all those things. It's something that is evolving. I think we don't have enough data around it. So I will leave that as a topic that we'll probably look at it in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Sonal, I think that's a really important point. I found the framing around the under and over the iceberg really interesting. In some ways, it also tells you that there is a common thread around this, right? It's not in isolation. You free up efficiency, productivity in one part. How can you channel it to better service, more revenue opportunities, but also newer revenue opportunities, right? And I think customer stickiness, customer loyalty is itself a big reward, right? And so I think it's a really interesting point. I want to make a quick plug for an exciting offer we have for our audience today for people dialing in. As again, if you've seen and or joined any of these events that we've done before, we typically have an interesting offer for people dialing in so that they can also engage with our analysts, our community in a deeper fashion after the LinkedIn Live. So you'll shortly see a link in the comments window. We are happy to offer a complimentary 30-minute meeting with our Everest Group analysts to discover or discuss agentic AI and customer experience and marketing. So you can use that link, register your intent, to borrow Nisha's term, for this conversation, and our team will be in touch. So having said that, I think maybe let me pick up something, Sunil, you mentioned and ask Nisha about that, which is how do you measure the impact of agentic AI? Because I think more than just the CMO or the head of CX, wherever that resides in your organization, I'm starting to see AI become a CFO conversation. Everybody's talking about how do I measure this, what's the right way of measuring, and how much is enough, right? It's easy to measure success in pilots or test use cases. How do I do it when it's in truly in production? And I think that requires a different art and a different science. So Nisha, let me ask you that as we work with these different stakeholders, as they try to scale, go from what we call pilot to production, what are you seeing in terms of emerging best practices, disciplines around this? We've seen this in cloud with FinOps and other areas as well. But are you seeing some interesting findings from your research?
Yeah, I think based on the conversations that I've been having with clients in the ROI space with respect to agentic I think a lot of them are adopting an approach where they are breaking the ROI into tangible metrics across certain categories that might be important to them. So, for example, if in their particular use case, agentic AI is leading to efficiency gains, then some of the measurable metrics that they are defining around it is, time saved, how many FTs they were able to reduce, faster turnaround, fewer manual interventions. Some of the other areas or categories where ROI is being measured is if the intent is cost savings, then fewer, what is the extent of fewer vendor dependencies, or what is the lower error correction costs. And if the objective of agentic AI in this case is revenue growth, then some of the measurable metrics that organizations are defining has to do with increased sales or better conversion rates or higher customer lifetime value. In certain cases, like Sunil was mentioning, the NPS and CSAT score, if the objective is again to enhance the experience quality, then some of the measurable metrics that some of the organizations are defining have to do with reduced churn, or it has to do with higher NPS and CSAT. And in certain cases, sometimes the category is also quality and compliance, wherein the measurable metrics are around lower error rates and improved brand compliance. So, largely, I'm seeing that the ROI discussion is being broken down into tangible metrics, and those tangible metrics are closely tied to the objective of enterprises having adopted this technology.
Absolutely. I think that's a fair point. And, because you mentioned NPS and some of the other metrics, I know there's a slight question around defining or clarifying NPS. So, NPS, for the uninitiated is Net Promoter Score. But simply put, a simple way for organizations to measure how likely are customers to recommend a company to other customers, right? So, typically done on a scale of 0 to 10. And then you try and triage your respondents into promoters, passive or detractors, essentially to understand if your customers are truly satisfied and loyal. And I think extending that point, I think how you measure that becomes important, but also where you measure it in the business and how do you get that data becomes important as well. What we've seen is interesting findings as clients scale their AI initiatives around, maybe there were certain unintended benefits they hadn't seen going into it. So it was done potentially from a cost lens, but it leads to some revenue implications. So, Nil, to your point around under and over the iceberg. So I think the discipline around extracting value and unlocking value from I suspect will evolve. So I think it's a very, very valid conversation. Maybe let's, I don't want to be just bullish on agentic AI. I don't want to pretend it's the best thing since sliced bread. There's never been anything better and it'll solve all ills. As you said, Sunil, often it starts with bad design or the lack of thought into design. Let's talk a little bit about what are the challenges as we do this, right? Challenges and potentially risks. And again, I want to bifurcate overall risks around AI, but also agentic AI, right? So if you look at overall AI risks, we've heard and discussed in previous conversations: hallucinations, autonomy, bias. And I think we can talk a little bit about this. But when it comes to agentic, I'm also seeing conversations around governance around agentic AI. For instance, with a large Fortune 100 company last week, and the questions were, effectively, when we think of agents in our context, is employees launching a workflow or a process? What happens when the employee leaves? What do I do with the governance around it? At Google Cloud a few weeks ago, they launched model context protocol and agent to agent interactions, right? So I think the whole protocol standards governance around agents is another big category. But Sunil, from your vantage point, especially as you see organizations scaling these initiatives, how are they managing the risks and the challenges, and B, are there some emerging I don't know if best practices are the right term, but considerations around managing agents at scale?
Sure. So let me get to the elephant in the room: hallucinations. Right? Hallucinations are caused as a side effect of the good parts of LLM. They are supposed to hallucinate. I have a friend whose company designs perfumes using LLMs. So they were able to generate new types of perfumes because of hallucination. So it's not a bad thing. But uncontrolled hallucination can be a recipe, for runaway LLMs, right? So uh, number one thing to do when designing or using an agentic pattern for AI is to build this thing called evals and guardrails, right? And I can be a little bit technical if you allow me to here. Evals are basically evaluation metrics, okay? And earlier we only used guardrails, but evaluation metrics can be done either like bottoms up planning or top down planning, okay? So when identifying different types of errors, then you can take a, as I said, top down or a bottom up approach. What does that mean? So when identifying, like if you go with a top down approach of evals, it's basically metrics like hallucination and toxicity. But while it is very convenient to approach, it can also miss the domain specific issues. Okay. But if you take a bottoms up approach on evals are like unit tests for LLMs. Okay. They're like unit tests for LLMs. You can actually take a bottoms up approach and then use actual data and actual metrics to for the metrics to emerge naturally. So you can have an LLM prompt as an as a checkpoint prompt for another LLM prompt. So it's a adversarial relationship between two prompts to validate each other's data. Okay, and for doing evals, you need solid observability. So there are foundational observability so that you can observe the behavior of an LLM. You can observe the agent to agent communication, as Nitesh mentioned earlier, A to A protocol that was just released recently. So you can observe that. You can observe reasoning paradigms, just like you observe your stack, right? So create observability, create evals, create good guardrails. The next one is very close to my heart, which I mentioned earlier, which is I believe AI is new UI and AI is less UI. That means don't today's applications are designed as CRUD, create, read, update, and delete. Modern AI could be way less UI with better experiences, right? Action before clicking a button, even. And that means rethink your applications. Do not just lift and shift. So there is a lot of design challenges and design risks because adoption of AI could be really poor if you just lift and shift applications. That's a challenge, and it's an investment that is needed from companies to redesign and rethink applications, right? The last one I mentioned before I stop is autonomy without control. So autonomy without control, understanding using your evals and guardrails, where is human intervention, where is human review, right? You don't want, and you have to have backstops for every autonomous task. So an autonomous task should have a human intervention possible if there is a runway process, for example, right? So do not build it as 100% autonomous. Start with co-pilots. Otherwise, it can be a significant risk to the operations of your business.
Yep. No, I think that's a really interesting point, and I think how do you do that on a continuous manner, embedded into the process? I really like your point around less UI. I think I think it's an interesting opportunity to really redesign the way we do things, not just as I said, make it go faster, but really reevaluate some of our very fundamental assumptions around UI design and marketing. So Nisha, if I flip it to you and get your sense across industries, across regions, as we do some of this work, what are you seeing in terms of primary challenges, and maybe if you take a hopeful look at it, right, how to resolve them, both in terms of documentation, org design, elements beyond just the technology?
Sure, thank you. So I think one of the primary challenges, and Sunil spoke about it as well, is the design challenge because agentic AI is not just a tech problem. Um, what the industry needs to think about is what does the user experience for intelligent agents look like, because most of the current websites, most of the current applications, they are not designed for goal based, for conversational, for agent led journeys. And if you were to design such an application, it requires fundamental rethinking of what the user journey and intent is, and based on that, what should you design. So it's a fundamental design problem than just being a technology problem. And so that is one thing that I've heard as a fundamental challenge in the industry. The second one is very interesting, and it has less to do with tech and design, but it's the building the entire trust ecosystem. Now, Nitish, when we started this conversation, you were talking about different technologies and how, the technologies change has continued to happen, and technology takes care of itself. People eventually adopt to different technologies. But what is important is to build a trust ecosystem around a technology for it to scale. And I'll give you an example. When e-commerce first came into picture, not many not many people or consumers were willing to share information of their cards or whatever digital payment systems, etc. Brands would always, or most of the brands would offer COD, cash on delivery option, right? Because the consumers did not trust the back-end financial system to work seamlessly, and therefore it did not scale to the extent that it should have. And fast tracking it today, there aren't many e-commerce websites which are giving you cash on delivery options. And if they are, there is a premium attached to it because the technology was able to scale because customers started trusting the payment systems more and more. If you extend this argument to agentic AI, to what extent will consumers be willing to give complete power in the hands of these agents? Is an important question for brands and for service providers to address, because if the trust economy or trust ecosystem does not evolve, it definitely comes in the way of this technology being adopted at scale. So yeah, design is a challenge, trust ecosystem is a challenge, and then the technical complexity of it, right? So Neil spoke about it, but if you think about agentic AI, it needs to talk to multiple systems within an organization, whether it is the CRM system, whether it is the product databases, whether it is inventory, whether it is support platforms, etc., in real time. How many organizations today have the API maturity and the data consistency to be able to do that is a big question. And therefore, the technical complexity is not just limited to what kind of agents are available today or what kind of agents you're designing, but are your backend systems mature enough to be able to adopt this technology at scale? So those are the three major challenges that I'm seeing. Then there are, of course, conversations around business process fit, because most businesses today are built on static workflows, as we know, and agentic AI challenges those traditional roles, right? It challenges those traditional handoffs. It challenges those traditional metrics as well. So
Yeah,
those are some of the challenges.
absolutely. I think it's a really interesting point. And Sunil, I think your point around eval struck a chord. I see a question around that. I think if I relay that back very quickly, because I know we have to now start wrapping up. How do we think about evals and implementing them and put checks and get continuous feedback? I guess the question is, should that be upfront as a part of agenda design? I suspect your answer is going to be yes, but I'll let you elaborate.
Absolutely, it should be. It should be actually the first step. And there was a for the listener, for the person who was actually posted that question, I would point them to the recent paper by OpenAI called "Designing Agentic." I think it's designing for enterprise. And the first step they also mentioned was evals. Step number one, right? And evals, think of it as I said earlier, test schemes for performance, reproducibility, reliability, and what Nisha mentioned, trust of its decision-making capabilities, right? So it's important to have evals and guarded. There are many products that allows you to implement evals. I'll give a plug to one of them called Fiddler, if you want to look at it. Fiddler is an evals platform, and there are several others available now that is upcoming. So this is not anymore rocket science. It's generally available technology that you can implement, and it's not hard. Just like a test platform, you have an evals platform for LLMs.
Yep. And I think, it's not hard to imagine a landscape where it starts to become a part of that continuous process. I can think of FinOps extending to what we started seeing as LLM ops. And then eventually, I'm sure there's going to be something around agent ops that makes sure that it's a part of this. And I'm sure we'll plug that OpenAI paper, I think, just under a month ago, which came out. But I think it's a great call out, Sunil. So I know we need to get to the home stretch. Both of you are busy, and you have things to do and places to get to. So let's try and talk about what gets you excited about the future of the space. We've spoken about, as I said, the context, how we got here, what's new, what's exciting. We spoke about where is it creating an impact and how much of that impact is getting created. How do you measure it? We've also touched upon a little bit around risks and what do you do about it. So maybe I have two questions to end with. One, what part of the stack and what's coming up next in the next 12 to 18 months around the space, around agentic AI and everything to do with marketing and experience? What is one thing that gives you or gets you the most excited? So let's start with that. So, Nisha, if I ask you, right, what gets you most excited as you look at a plethora of these technologies and innovation, both from startups, scale ups, enterprises? What can we expect next in the next 12 to 18 months?
See, I think what gets me most excited is that this entire agentic AI, a lot of people and enterprises think of it as a smarter and smarter and smarter way of adoption automation. It's not. It's a paradigm shift with respect to how enterprises have continued to operate and design experiences. And that paradigm shift requires a fundamental rethink of how enterprises operate and deliver value to their customers. So that is something that I'm very excited about. I'm extremely excited about. So I have a conviction that enterprises that are able to embrace it early are going to really leapfrog competitors. So I'm excited about seeing some of these use cases scaling in the industry and what kind of ROI are they delivering for some of these businesses. And at the end of the day, and we've been discussing this throughout the conversation, that it's not just about tech, it is about rethinking processes and organization mindset. And that's not an easy thing to do. It's easy to implement tech. It's difficult to change the mindset of an organization, forget people, and rethinking of the processes. So, how that is going to happen and how this paradigm shift is going to get powered, that is something I'm very, very excited about.
Great answer. And Sunil, what about you? Or what gives you the most hope or excitement in this space?
I'll wear the technical hat on this one. And number one is large context windows. Large context windows allow you to see the bigger picture when you're understanding context. And they're game changers, I think. Second one is, I think, personal favorite is active inference. Models have a shelf life. They learn from data unless you do some interesting engineering that connects what Nisha was mentioning earlier about connecting to the enterprise, like using RAG, right? So retrieval augmented generation to connect to your enterprise. But the model has a shelf life. Active inference allows a model to continuously learn with incoming data, right? That's a space which is amazing. Third thing is, actually, I'm really glad to see standardization right now. So agent to agent protocol is one. I know MCP is fraught with a lot of different security issues, but it will become normal, right? So your LLM based on demand integration is a game changer in the enterprise, right? So for tool use. The last thing I would say is not technical, it's a philosophical one, which is AI becoming normal. So AI, there is no need to in the future to say, I'm going to build an AI native application. AI is the new normal. It's just normal to do AI, and I'm seeing that in enterprises. I'm really seeing that as a very emerging pattern with decision makers today and budget allocators.
Perfect. No, I think that's a great perspective. I'm going to put you both on the spot for one last question, which is, you know, any advice for enterprises who are curious about how they scale agentic AI? So, if you were to offer just one piece of advice for enterprises tuning in, our clients and other organizations we interact with, around how best to leverage this technology, anything that helps them get the most value, what would that be? So, Nisha, let me hand it over to you, and then Sunil.
Sure. Now, since you said only one, I'll stick to one, Nitish. I think for me, the first recommendation would be to pick high friction, high volume customer experience use cases and define clear, measurable value around that. What I mean by it is for your brand, which are the areas where customers struggle most frequently, where the frustration is high, where the abandonment is high. And then, based on that, can you adopt this technology in order to deliver frictionless experience for that particular touch point? That would be my first recommendation.
Perfect. That's a good one to start with. Sunil, what about you?
My recommendation was to take a test and learn approach. So pick one, if you're, for example, if you're an e-tailer, e-commerce company, pick one product category and make it agentic experience and learn from it and before moving the entire store. And you don't have to change the full stack. You can augment the stack, take a category, make it agentic, learn from that, and move your store back. That's a recommendation by example.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in some ways, a great embodiment of what we said in the beginning, progress over perfection, really not letting, perfection be the enemy of good. I think those are great pieces of advice. And I'm pretty certain that the audience that we have tuning in, which I think is still look at it, and it's a pretty global audience across different functions, will find a lot of benefit from. So Nisha and Sunil, I'd like to thank you both again for making the time today, for partaking in this conversation. We've gone for nearly 50 minutes without a slide, so I think that's a personal achievement, which is always great. And I'm sure this recording will live on the internet, and others can reference this going forward. Sunil, from Everest Group, we wish you all the best with the soul of the machine. Can't wait to see what you guys come up with next. As for the audience, there's a bunch of resources that are in the comments. Please feel free to use them. Reach out to Sunil, others as needed. But thank you for dialing in and making the time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.